Good. Hi, my name is Jack Mangan, and today I will be talking about how misinformation on TikTok and how it impacts high school students. My goal of my research paper was to find how impactful misinformation on TikTok was with high school students. So, what interested me in this topic was I myself use TikTok on a daily basis, and a bunch of other high school students also use TikTok on a daily basis. And hearing all the time that there's a lot of misinformation on TikTok and it's bad for you, I was naturally just interested in learning more about this. So, what really is TikTok? Well, TikTok is a popular social media app that has emerged in the past 10 years. Sorry. It has over 1 billion users, with a large portion of the percentage coming from the younger generations. And TikTok uses short videos for its entertainment and uses a swiping method to watch the next videos, which keeps the audience engaged. This has led to my research question, which is, to what extent does TikTok impact high school students with the spread of misinformation at a private high school in Florida? My hypothesis was that my study would find the exposure to misinformation on TikTok will negatively influence high school students. Now for my literature review. Researcher Christy L. Marnell, who is a public health program specialist, and Megan Morin, who is an associate professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, observed a nicotine trend on TikTok. This trend portrayed e-cigarettes as cool, with TikTok users posting their collections of vapes and basically posing them as cool and fun. This raised a huge concern for the researchers due to vapes having nicotine, which is a highly addicting alkaloid and has very toxic chemicals that have been linked to cancer and other chemicals that have very little research on. My next part of my literature review was from researcher Yvonne Wade Sanchez, a communication practitioner with over 25 years of experience, found in her study that TikTok did have some decently accurate information. However, due to anyone being able to post on TikTok, there was a lot of information that should be taken with a grain of salt. She said that TikTok overall lacked academic institutions to back up information that's being posted. To continue with this presentation, it's important to learn some key terms, starting with misinformation, which is information that's being posted on TikTok, and information that's being posted on TikTok that isn't accurate and is being spread. And then there's the For You page, which is a personalized feed of videos to tailor each user's interest. This is made by engagement with users using the like button, sharing videos to others, commenting, and also TikTok realizes how long users are on a video, which basically how long the user is viewing videos, which then they place those same type of videos on your For You page to keep you scrolling and keeps you on the app for hours. So for my gap, previous studies have found that TikTok does have misinformation. However, previous studies haven't dived into the real world impacts misinformation has on individuals. Specifically, the topic of high school students hasn't been studied. This leading me into my method sections, which I used a Google Form survey for my method sections, and I emailed out my survey to everyone at my school. My research required a large number of responses from my school, so I deemed the best possible option was to make a survey and email it out. This way it was very easy and efficient for me. My survey consisted of 13 questions and was broken into 3 sections of TikTok content, identifying misinformation, and influencing high school students. Additionally, there was a question asked for individuals' consent to be used for my research before the survey began. Now diving into my results section. The first question I asked was in the TikTok/content section. The question being asked, on an average day, how much time do you spend on TikTok? The results of this were only roughly 20% of students were on TikTok for under an hour. The rest of the students were on TikTok for more than 2 hours, and over 20% of students were on for more than 4 hours a day, meaning overall students spent a significant amount of time per day on TikTok. My next part was, the next question I pulled was in the influencing high school students section. The question I asked was, how do you feel alcohol is portrayed on TikTok? I asked this question to find if high school students had more positive content regarding alcohol versus negative content being on TikTok. With only 12% of students finding TikTok portraying alcohol as a negative, with 43% finding TikTok portraying alcohol as more positive and fun. The rest were 45% of students had mixed content portraying alcohol between negative and positive. So overall, alcohol is being portrayed as a positive at a high percentage. The next part was pulled from the influencing high school students section. The question asked was, how do you feel nicotine is portrayed on TikTok? This question was asked to compare if nicotine was being portrayed as positive or negative on high school students. Surveys results were a lot better in terms of nicotine being viewed as less positive at only 28% compared to 43% of alcohol, while 30% of students had negative content regarding nicotine. Lastly, only over 40% of students having neutral content about nicotine, meaning overall nicotine does not have as much potential to influence students as alcohol on TikTok. This is my final question from my results section. I pulled this from the influencing high school students section. This question was asked, do you feel you are more likely to believe information that is repeated on your For You page? This question was asked to see if content repeated on TikTok resulted in students believing information repeated. That way, if students believe information repeated on TikTok, it could therefore result in high school students being influenced with content like alcohol and nicotine. With that being said, the results showed only 6% of students were never likely to believe information on TikTok repeated, while 43% of students were more likely to believe content on TikTok repeated. The rest of the percentage were neutral at 51%. This leads to the finding of my results now. So I originally believed that the more time spent per day on TikTok would result in a correlation with alcohol and nicotine being portrayed as more positive and fun. However, when I looked at a Google Sheets to compare a correlation, I did not find any correlation between this. My second finding was alcohol on TikTok is being portrayed as positive and fun at a high percentage. And then my final finding was there was only 6% of respondents who felt they were never likely to believe information on TikTok, repeated on TikTok, meaning that the rest of the percentage of responders were a lot more likely to believe information repeated on TikTok. Now leading to my discussion, overall I found that my hypothesis was correct, that misinformation on TikTok would negatively impact high school students. My study found that over 80% of students were on TikTok for more than 2 hours a day, meaning students were exposed to a high amount of misinformation on TikTok. With that in mind, my study also found that 43% of students were more likely to believe information repeated on TikTok, which means the more time spent on TikTok leads to more misinformation being believed. This is alarming due to content with alcohol already being portrayed on TikTok as positive and fun. To summarize, this means that the more time spent on TikTok per day exposes students more to misinformation, which can cause high school students to believe that content regarding alcohol and nicotine to be more fun and positive, which would have high school students to not understand the true consequences of topics like this and other potential topics that could be dangerous that they are consuming. So I filled my gap because previous studies had found that there was misinformation on TikTok being spread, but they didn't explore the real world impactations. I found that the more time per day students use TikTok, the more misinformation they would believe, resulting in students to be more likely influenced to engage in potentially harmful decisions. My study also focused on high school students being impacted by misinformation on TikTok, which previous studies hadn't done. My limitations of my research was interviews, survey wording, and not all students taking my survey seriously. I originally wanted to do interviews additionally to a survey, but I had time constraints. I wanted to do a survey to get in more depth answers from my research. I truly believe I would have been able to find out how much TikTok influenced students to participate in activities regarding alcohol and nicotine with the interviews. My next limitation that I ran into was survey wording. I had some students come up to me who were a little confused about the survey. I was able to answer students' questions regarding questions on the survey. However, I had 143 responders, so I wasn't able to get to everyone. Leading to my final limitation, there may have been students who rushed to the survey just to say they finished the survey for me, so I may have not gotten the most accurate answers through that way. The implications of my study is, from my research, is the more time spent on TikTok per day equals more misinformation being spread. This means students would consume more misinformation the more time spent on TikTok per day, resulting in a higher chance for students to be influenced to participate in topics regarding alcohol, nicotine, and other topics that could be harmful to individuals. For my future research, I believe future researchers should definitely have interviews to get in more depth answers. That way, it would gauge how much students who answered alcohol and nicotine being portrayed as positive and fun, how much they were really actually influenced by TikTok. Additionally, if future researchers did more surveys, I would make the surveys questions very easy and clear to understand. That way they can get the most accurate information. Finally, I'd have future researchers study other age groups to see how much misinformation impacts different age groups to see if there was a comparison or not. On my bibliography. And then on to oral defense.
Thank you, Jack. How did you determine which results generated by your research method were most important in informing your new understanding?
Yeah, so I pulled my questions and from my results from the influencing high school student section. I found that this gave the most information regarding misinformation impacting these high school students. That's why I chose the questions mostly out of the influencing high school students section of my survey.
Jack, how does your new understanding address a gap in the scholarly conversation?
Say that question again?
Sure. How does your new understanding address a gap in the scholarly conversation?
My new understanding of the gap was that the real world implications of high school students with misinformation had them, they really, that more time spent on TikTok per day would result in students to believe more misinformation, which previous studies hadn't found.
How did you handle the uncertainty of the research process?
I handled the uncertainty of the research process because I was really motivated to understand more about TikTok and the misinformation that it has. And I just really wanted to learn more about my topic. So when things got hard, it just pushed me to learn more and get my whole thing done.